spoiler alert, everything for Freud is wish fulfillment. Everything. A déjà vu is you fantasized about this thing happened, maybe it's something that you wanted to have happen, and then when it happens, you have this weird feeling that you've experienced it before, even though you haven't, because at least in your unconscious fantasy life, you have.
Welcome, gentlemen. Nice to see you, and welcome everybody to the inaugural official podcast of the Open Therapy Institute. I am writer and podcaster Meghan Daum. I guess I'm the moderator. I'm here with Rob Henderson, a social psychologist, author, and commentator, and Andrew Hartz, who is the founder of the Open Therapy Institute, which champions open inquiry in psychology. And I guess that's what we're here to talk about today. Everything needs a podcast. Yeah, I can't believe it's taken you this long to get one going. So here we are.
This started, I think, with you, actually, because Rob and I did a talk together. Maybe it was before that, because Rob and I were on a couple panels together, but I think one of them was moderated by you. And then Rob started asking me questions about psychoanalysis and like, where do you start to learn about psychoanalysis? What do you read? What do like the people who actually do this stuff read? Cause there's lots of like noise out there and like bad books and jargony, impossible books and academic BS. And so what do people who actually do this stuff read to get whatever is good about psychoanalysis, in their practice? So I started giving them some book recommendations, and we were like, let's do we could do a podcast. We could make it like a book club, every week we do a different book or article or something, and we kind of work our way through, the essentials of psychoanalysis. But then it kind of I think it's kind of like modified from there. Of we wanted to bring you in and make sure that we weren't kind of like flying off into, overly academic, stuff.
So
and
then to bring the esoteric jargon down.
Make it real. And, when I was in grad school and it was we were supposed to write a psychoanalytic formulation of of patients or something, they would say, no jargon. You have to translate the concepts into human language and not just drop lots of terms. So I do think to do psychoanalysis well, you're kind of not using the terms in a way, you're kind of making it real. And I try, because otherwise you're not going to tell your patient that you think they're projectively identifying. You're going to
I tell that to people I'm in relationship with. That's what you tell your partner.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm learning already.
Okay. Yeah. It's always, discussion is over. You've won. As soon as you do that.
And I see when I look online, I don't know. I mean, there's a billion, podcasts and YouTube stuff, but a lot of it is summarizing everything about Freud in 2.5 minutes or something. It's a lot of but I was maybe there's room for the opposite of that. Really kind of taking our time and unpacking stuff and going deeper into what's actually there, not doing the 2-minute summary of everything in psychoanalysis, and people can listen to it at 2x speed, but it's something where we're actually going slower, really kind of getting more expert depth. What do practitioners in New York, the psychoanalysts in New York, what are they doing? And trying to articulate that for people more detail.
Well, let me ask you, Rob, why were you interested in getting some titles from Andrew? And what have you been reading and what have you been getting out of it?
Yeah, well, so as Andrew mentioned, we'd had a couple of conversations. We'd been on some panels together. And one thing I brought up with Andrew is that in modern academic psychology, you very seldom, if ever, hear about the pioneers of early psychology. You might get kind of half a lecture on Freud and intro psych, but it's mostly concentrating on his mistakes and we've moved on from that. And so they'll talk about some of his more outlandish theories. But then, when I read other texts and other books and articles, they occasionally make reference to him. And when I read about him, it seems like, in many ways we concentrate on his mistakes because he got a lot right. And I think it may be embarrassing for a lot of modern academic psychologists to acknowledge this. There's a book by Paul Bloom, who's a psychology professor at UToronto, who I studied under back when he was at Yale. And he wrote in one of his books that it's something like, when psychologists today talk about Freud, it's like a modern drug company being embarrassed that they got their start selling cocaine. The early days of medication it was the Wild West, and, weird things were happening. And then over time, things improve and advance. And then we want to forget the origin of how this all started. So, I asked Andrew for some reading recommendations. He sent me a syllabus. The other thing is, you'd mentioned, Meghan, you introduced me as a social psychologist. I don't necessarily object to that label. It's close enough. I don't really.
We both of you are. I also introduced Andrew as a psychoanalyst.
But
Okay.
People will hear that I'm a psychologist of some sort, and in the general public, when they think of a psychologist, to this day, they still think someone like Freud. You're treating patients, you have the long sofa, you're supposed to be an expert in mental health. And most psychologists have nothing to do with mental health, nothing to do with clinical treatment. And so the joke I'll sometimes tell is I'm a psychologist, but not the kind that helps people. But I think that, since I did do a PhD in psychology, and I have some expertise in other domains in human behavior, I know very little about the clinical psychology, psychoanalysis, Freud, Jung. I mean, by now I've read a little bit about them, and skimmed some articles and read some chapters. But no, I saw this as an opportunity to maybe sort of learn openly, publicly, in a way that might help listeners. So, I'm coming at this also as kind of a novice, and, hopefully, maybe be able to connect it with whatever I've learned, in terms of sort of modern empirical social psychology, evolutionary psychology, personality psychology. And so, hopefully Andrew and I can kind of complement each other, in that way with your help, Meghan.
I think one thing that's really interesting about what you said that I think is like so important is like, there is such a gap between how the clinical psychologists approach and think about their work and all the other psychologists, I think, tend to think about their work. Because when you're a research psychologist, you're kind of looking to find relationships, like marital status is correlated with blah, 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 and mental health is related to this behavior or whatever. You're thinking about these large relationships, like average relationships across population and things like that. The clinical approach, especially psychoanalytic approaches, you're thinking about idiosyncrasies of individuals. So you want to have a model that helps you come up with like a unique formulation for each person that like caters to their individuality. It's called like, the jargon is idiographic. This is an idiographic.
Which is mnemothetic, right?
Yes. Personality assessment. So you want concepts that help you understand unique individuals. And when I look, especially on social media, frankly, even when it's clinical psychologists, or clinical people, they tend to be making broad sweeping claims about like, if you're overattached to your mother, it's because of this. And if you have trauma, then you're like this. But it's actually like most of what we do is the opposite. It's like what's unique about your situation that's like, you're not like everyone else.
Yeah. I remember reading about this, that there's this distinction in terms of how psychologists approach research. So idiographic, meaning sort of a case study of the individual and what works for them. And then the mnemothetic approach, which is like analyzing large data sets and looking at averages and, forming conclusions based on that of statistical relationships, correlations, attempting to isolate cause and effect. Generally that's what I'm partial to. I mean, that's kind of how I was trained, and that's, just what was inculcated in me. But, I do think there's also a lot of value in the idiographic approach of looking at individuals, because the idea of a statistical average is in many ways a kind of a useful fiction of no one is exactly average across every single attribute you're measuring. Individual, there's a lot of variation. There are outliers. There are, important reasons for why we do that. But at the same time, it's hard to say, okay, so this was the outcome based on averages, but that doesn't necessarily apply to the individual. And in a lot of ways, I think, social science tends to strip away the complexities, the depth of human life in that way, which is one reason among others why I wanted to learn about this. And in my my life, I read a lot of biographies and memoirs and historical fiction, and trying to learn about individuals in addition to kind of the large scale kind of big data set stuff. And I will read about, one thing that was interesting to me that kind of got me intrigued was a couple of years ago, I read this this interview of Danielle Seif, who interviewed this other, she was actually an evolutionary anthropologist, Sarah Hrdy. And they started talking about this idea of maternal instinct, maternal care, and they were approaching it very much from this evolutionary framework. And that's kind of what I studied was evolutionary psychology, and they talked about how from the mother's point of view, in the ancestral environment, women often had to make very difficult choices about whether to supply care for infants. And, it's not as simple as, unconditional love that is responsive to material resources, social support, all these things. And they had to make difficult choices about how much to invest in any given infant. And that was interesting to me. But then they also talked about this idea of this kind of Jungian archetype of the death mother, which is rather than taking the perspective of the mother deciding whether or not to supply care for an infant, it takes the perspective of the infant who desires care from the mother. And so this death mother archetype is on some, I guess, unconscious level, the infant is aware that the mother has to make these choices about whether to care for the infant. And then this, I guess, archetype or this template exists of the death mother, which is this mother who is perceived by the infant to be cold and uncaring and unfeeling, and so the infant is kind of motivated to I guess seek sustenance and care from the mother. And I thought, okay, that sounds a little weird to me. But then I started reading about it. I'm like, okay, this makes a certain amount of sense. And then that got me sort of reading a little bit about Jung, and then of course then you backtrack to Freud and the whole idea of sort of archetypes and what is it, like the Oedipal conflict between mother and child and all this stuff. And that was kind of my, I guess, gateway into interest in psychoanalysis, was first from this interesting interview on evolutionary psychology, and then seeing how it intersects with like old school psychoanalysis.
That's interesting. I'll just one of the things that I like about it, and I think maybe this archetype kind of speaks to that, is that psychoanalysis is often talking about things that the rest of psychology isn't talking about as much, like the meaning of dreams or jokes or superstitions, or the resonant of archetypes or certain types of or sex or certain types of certain types of issues that I think a lot of the not that they're not written about, but they're maybe not déjà vu or something. Freud has a really interesting theory of déjà vu and or doppelgangers and things they're, I'm sure there's journal articles out there somewhere. You don't necessarily get those in your social psych class.
Wait, I want to talk about déjà vu for a moment, because what was Freud's explanation for it?
That you have unconsciously fantasized about it before, so you really kind of have seen it before, and it's something about it is something that you either desire. Everything for Freud, I'll just give spoiler alert, everything for Freud is wish fulfillment. Everything. And this is and so jokes are a way of expressing a desire. Dreams are a way of expressing a desire. Slips are a desire. Forgetting is it like everything is wish fulfillment. So a déjà vu is you fantasized about this thing happened. Maybe it's something that you wanted to have happen. And then when it happens, you have this weird feeling that you've experienced it before, even though you haven't, because at least in your unconscious fantasy life, you have.
Wow. So one of the explanations for déjà vu that's always stuck with me, it actually comes from a Don DeLillo novel. I think it was White Noise, and maybe he borrowed it from some thinker, but the character or the narrator or some character says it's the mind's way of making you feel like you're in a familiar place. Like it's a subconscious, it's an unconscious comforting mechanism. So you feel like the world isn't quite so strange. So it's as if the mind delivers you sort of moments of familiarity. I mean,
oh, so it's
whatever, but
that's interesting. I mean, that's the thing of like, I feel like that still works as a kind of a psychoanalytic interpretation. If you're kind of saying when you're in novel environments and that's stressful or threatening, you kind of have this defense of making it seem not that.
But déjà vu, but it crops up like at random times. Like it doesn't, like the déjà vu just can kind of happen, and it usually happens in the most banal way. I find like, oh, I feel like I've said this sentence before in this conversation, or I've been this person, I've been in this encounter before, and this person has said this, and I said this, but like it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this, that you would expect déjà vu. I mean, if it's something that you've unconsciously wished before, that it would either happen in kind of a extremely emotionally valenced way. So if something really good is happening to you, you know, the person you've been romantically interested in for a long time finally agrees to go on a date with you. But that doesn't seem to be when déjà vu happens, is, you know, extremely exciting moments. Right. Or you could imagine maybe the opposite, where something bad happens to you and then maybe unconsciously you think you deserve to be punished, but that also doesn't seem to be when déjà vu happens. I mean, this is all based on my own personal experiences, like similar to you, Meghan. It's always like these banal, like, you know, oh, I'm walking to the store, or having a phone call with someone talking about something trivial. And yeah, I wonder, like, Andrew, does Freud have an explanation for this, or is this even something that other, you know, is that how people experience déjà vu?
I think the main thing to keep coming back to is that this is like I think the best way to do this, and often the way Freud did do it, is ideographic. So like if you dream, like we'll come back to déjà vu in a second, but if you dream about a shoe, it's not like, oh, shoe means this. It's like, tell me about shoes. Why do shoes mean something to you if they do mean something? You're like, oh, my dad used to beat me with a shoe or something. It's like, okay, that means something different than the person who, like, you know, the person they had a crush on in middle school had these amazing shoes. And like, what, like, if you're gonna, where do they, so what's the ideographic meaning here? So if you're like, people think it means nothing, but it's really not unusual that you're like, oh, I was walking to the store and I saw this and it felt like déjà vu, and it's totally no reason at all. No big deal. But then you kind of like slow down and you're like, well, what were you doing? What happened that day? What were you buying? And the person's like, oh, I saw a red carnation that, you know, was exactly what my mom was wearing in her coffin after she died or something. It's like, so it's
I didn't know where that was going.
It's like you have like,
you're going to say at her, you know, 50th wedding anniversary.
Something that's like an evocative symbol that it's like, I would never, oh, you saw a red carnation and you thought you saw it before. And that doesn't mean anything to me, but like you have this association, often an unconscious association that could be behind it. I do think you can overwork this. You can really overdo this. And Freud absolutely does overdo it. I mean, he would say, like, he had this whole thing in Psychopathology of Everyday Life where he talks about, think of a random number and you're like 72. And he's like, that means something. So like, let's take it apart. And like 7 means this and 2 means
I think that's the number of virgins you get if you blow yourself up under a certain religious framework, 72 virgins. So yeah, I think that would be, yeah. Because I thought of the same number, Andrew. So, you know, not one if it means anything.
Well, I'm
Now-
also
now-
on some Me Too versions where we're.
I think it's 72. Yeah.
Well, so okay, is déjà vu connected at all to having recurrent dreams, or I have recurrent locations in dreams? Like, do you ever have this? Like, what is that about?
Yeah, I have the I think it's sometimes called the test dream, where I suddenly am back in high school or college and there's an exam and I haven't been to any of the classes and it sneaks up on you and suddenly you have to take this exam you're unprepared for. Yeah, and that seems to be an extremely common dream.
Yes.
So
Do you feel, Megan, do you want to share your recurring dream
Oh
state?
yeah, there are like locations that I find myself at like routinely. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, but like that have been going on for like a very long time. Like ever since I was probably in my early 20s, I've had a recurring dream location where I'm at the place in the New York City subway where the subway turns around. Like it's the subway train comes to the end of the stop and then it turns around and I would see like the track workers and I see them working on the tracks and the train's going to go the other direction. And like nothing really happens in the dream. I'm just present at this location. But yeah, it's just, this has been, I mean, I don't know. It's not like I have it maybe once a year now or like every couple of years, but it's definitely part of my unconscious.
So is there, so
Experience.
you get the end of the line and they're turning the train around to go the other way. And your feeling is like, is it nice to be seeing this, or is you kind of like you missed your stop, or
Now it's I wasn't even necessarily on the train. I'm just observing it. And actually the subway workers working on the track are they're very familiar characters in my dreams.
oh, they come up a lot?
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, especially in this, I don't have this dream as much as I used to, but I definitely had it a lot in my 20s. I mean, I must have, I think I probably wrote it down. Like, it's sort of like in my repertoire of dreams, this like comes to mind very easily. I can't remember the last time I actually had this dream, but yeah, like the subway workers working on the tracks, they wear their vests. It's dark. There's lights, you know, it's underground.
And you don't have any sort of, there's nothing that you're particularly feeling or wanting or trying to do amidst this?
It's a little bit, there might be like a hint of danger, but it's more like, oh, here we are again. I'm watching this happen, you know.
Wait, it's a lucid dream? So you're aware that you're dreaming?
If I'm aware that, that's a good question. I mean, probably not now. Although speaking of lucid dreams, sorry, I want to hear you guys' dreams, but when I do a lucid dream means you know you're dreaming when you're in it.
Yeah.
Okay. I love this because when I can have these, I start flapping my arms in the dream and I can fly and I fly all around and it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Flying is great. Yeah, I mean, like there is a method of dream interpretation that works pretty well. And it's been empirically validated, and it's basically like, but the questions are kind of like, there's something you want to do. There's a response coming from another person or the environment, and then there's how you feel at the end. So this dream, it feels like there's this kind of like mechanical process that you're not really entirely involved in, that you're watching, and there's not really a desire at the beginning or a feeling at the end. And I kind of have it's almost like, doesn't actually seem like it has a dysphoric, like a negative tone to it, but it's almost like you're like amidst these machinations that are happening and are kind of passive. To me, those are the features. But what happens is you kind of, if you hear like 10 dreams from somebody, there's usually a dominant pattern of what they want, what the other person does or the environment does, and how they feel after. And that pattern usually mirrors the narratives that they tell about their life, their relationships, and their work or whatever. So it's kind of a mirror of the same types of patterns they're experiencing elsewhere. You are somebody who like is a very astute observer of things. And I kind of feel like you're in that observing mode maybe a lot. And like it might mirror that part of it, but it's interesting to me. Yeah, you're kind of, your main function is watching and maybe curiosity or something. But like, yeah.
I often have dreams that I'm in trouble or somebody's mad at me, especially when I was younger. It was like, oh, I did something terrible. Like I committed a crime.
Yeah.
And I'm in trouble. Yeah, that was big. Anyway, what are your recurring dreams, Rob?
I mean, yeah, I'd mentioned this being unprepared for final test in class. The flying one's interesting. I occasionally get this recurring dream of flying, but what I guess like one difference is that I'm not flapping my arms, but it's weird because it feels surprisingly realistic that it's not like I suddenly jump into the sky. I'm maybe levitating 1 or 2 inches off the ground and I'm learning to fly in the dream. And then gradually, as I master this skill, then I'm able to fly higher and higher. And so it feels real in the dream that, wow, I have this ability and it's very unwieldy and I'm unpracticed at it. But as I work and put in some effort, I'm able to control it. And so it's like, you know, in some ways kind of exciting because it feels real in the dream. But then on the other hand, it's like, you know, if you're going to fly in a dream, you know, you want to fly. And it's never like that for me. I'm never flying like Superman, through the clouds. It's always just kind of, hovering, across the room or something.
How do you fly, Megan?
Well, I can fly. I flap my arms because there's a moment in the dream where I'm like, oh, this is a dream. And I'm going to take advantage of this situation and I'm going to go like this. And then I start flying around the room that I'm in and I'm the only one flying. Sometimes the other people are, just on the ground normally. And they're like, they don't understand that I'm in a dream and I'm going to fly and I have the ability to do this. And sometimes I like go out the window. It's often in the city, actually. Like I'm kind of flying around buildings in the city.
In LA or in New York?
No, in New York City.
Oh,
yeah, like it's top, like it's urban setting.
Yeah. I have this dream that I remember from when I was a little kid that just had a big impact on me. We had a minor league baseball team in Albuquerque where I grew up, and they were called the Dukes. And I'm there with my brother, with my family, and my brother says there's a zoo that's been built behind the stadium, and not in reality, but in the dream. And my brother says, "Do you want to go look at it?" I say, "Sure." So we kind of go around behind the outfield, and there's a zoo there. And then in one of the areas, my brother says there's that woman in there is a witch. And I say, how can you tell? And he says, because she's holding her wallet in her fingernails. And then I kind of realize she's a witch and try to get away. She kind of like floats towards me and touches me at the solar plexus, and I wake up with her fingernails. She has these long fingernails. And but it's kind of like a horror themed thing. But I told this to a Lacanian supervisor I had, and the first thing he said was, Oh, I might not have left this. The name of the minor league baseball team in Albuquerque was called the Dukes.
Yeah.
His whole association to it was the Dukes. He fixated on the Dukes. But I think it's like, but the reason why I think that's like important, just in terms of like, is like, that's a really like, I could see the Dukes being a really loaded word. And sometimes the thing that unlocks the meaning of the dream is the thing that you think is the irrelevant detail. And it's not necessarily, he didn't have the formula of, I'm trying to do something and then this is the outcome or something. But, he didn't use that narrative, but it does. I think I had it more than once. Yeah, I think I had it a few times, and it definitely, I still remember it from being a little kid.
I mean, this idea of the dukes, is that like, I mean, I'm trying to, I'm thinking of associations with this word or what this word could mean. So dukes, like, I'm thinking of like, I guess, royalty, a duke,
I don't get
or like dukes as in, because she used her fingers to touch you. There's the phrase like, put up your dukes, like for fighting, to put up your fist. Is that kind of what your Lacanian supervisor was?
Daisy Dukes, Dukes of Hazzard.
Dukes of Hazzard. Okay.
These are really like, these are really charged associations where like this word Dukes is associated with like aggression, put up your Dukes. Yeah. Daisy Dukes is kind of maybe like a sexual thing. Dukes has a royalty element. Dukes of Hazzard has maybe like a political Southern confession. All this
like the swamps of Louisiana or something.
It's such a charged, it's a really charged image with like lots of associations that could be drawn off of it. And maybe like, I think would also like, he was the type of person that would like focusing on the thing that you think is not important, that seems charged. And you'll kind of weirdly like find that you'll have a whole conversation about dukes, and then you'll leave the session and you're kind of like buzzing weirdly. Like I don't know how to kind of like explain that sensation.
So two other recurring dreams I have, and I'm curious, Andrew, so you mentioned wish fulfillment. So I'll describe these, and then I want to ask sort of like how these patterns or these dreams relate to wish fulfillment. And these are so the dreams are basically kind of similar. So one is I get recalled back into the military and it sucks. I'm like back in basic training and I'm like, how am I like back here? And then the other is when you are discharged from service, you have to complete this checklist, go to all these appointments, and verify like everything is in order before they allow you to go. And in the dream, I'm frantically trying to complete this checklist by a certain deadline, and if I don't, I have to stay in for another 4 years or something. And so I'm stressing in the dream trying to complete all these tasks. How is this like? What is the wish being fulfilled here? Because these are not pleasant dreams.
Such an obvious question, because it's like everybody knows that nightmares exist. Mm-hmm. So like that's not of course. So how does his theory explain this? Mm-hmm. And he struggled so hard with this. There's lots of reasons why he was so attached to wish fulfillment. And we'd have to kind of go into his model. We can do that another time, but he was very attached to that. And he would come up with really weird theoretical twists to explain things like, why do patients want to talk about their trauma? Why do people do self-destructive stuff? Why does masochism exist? Why do people have nightmares? All this stuff. He could not answer this stuff. And he came up with really weird, interesting theories about it. One of them was repetition compulsion, that for different reasons, you're compelled to repeat painful events. And he had to kind of explain how your drive for wish fulfillment got contorted. And another one later on that he came up with was the idea of the death drive, that like you have this desire for annihilation or something that feeds into this. So he would come up and again, I don't know that either of those are really great ways of explaining, like, for example, like Rob, your dreams here. Like but I just think it's totally on point to point out that it doesn't work all the time. And he really tried to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, and this was sort of before my exposure to, the ideas in psychoanalysis of Freud and Jung and so on. But one of the most compelling explanations of why we dream that I'd read was this neuroscientist, Eric Hole, who developed the overfitted brain hypothesis. And I don't necessarily think it negates the sort of the psychoanalytic dream interpretation approach, but what the overfitted brain hypothesis suggests is that essentially most of our daily life looks very similar. And so it sort of takes this computational approach where like all of the training data that we feed into our brain is very similar, and there's a risk that we overfit or overinterpret our everyday experiences as normal, and then we forget how to interact to novelty and to surprise. And so during our periods of sleep, our brain concocts sort of bizarre and unusual scenarios that are kind of similar to real life, but not exactly, in order to essentially change up the training data that our minds are exposed to so that we can accustomize ourselves to potential novelty that we don't necessarily experience in our day-to-day lives, so that we can be prepared for unexpected events. But that doesn't answer the question of why those specific things, why is it those specific events in our dreams? Why do those occur, right? Because it doesn't necessarily seem random. We have recurring dreams. There are kind of patterns you can identify in the dreams, and each person's dreams are different and idiosyncratic. And so the overfitted brain hypothesis kind of gives you this blanket explanation of, okay, you're getting different kinds of training data in your sleep, but then why do those characters reappear? Why are you in those specific scenarios? Why do you feel those particular emotions that you're feeling in the dreams? And then I think here maybe sort of Freudian and psychoanalytic ideas can help to explain kind of at the individual level why those specific dreams that we have.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a modern, maybe not like a classically Freud, but maybe still a psychoanalytic interpretation would be that these are, problems. Yeah, problems that people have encountered that they're trying to master or figure out how to respond to. And sometimes your attempt at mastering something difficult fails, and maybe you wake up. And then other times, maybe you actually feel like you make some progress, and the dream is kind of helping you work through, an experience or a dilemma or challenge that you have. And people do wake up after a nap and they've solved a math problem or something, or they've solved it. They have an insight, that they've sometimes have made some type of progress in it. I think those work, and I think you can still take a lot of ideas about unconscious thoughts and feelings being reflected in your dreams and being worked through in your dreams. You can kind of take that idea without having to take necessarily the piece that it's always wish fulfillment or trying to tie the death drive into it in some confusing way or something. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen different, and these are not scientists or psychologists, but that idea of really focusing on an idea or a problem you're trying to solve, and then forgetting about it, and then later the solution comes to you unexpectedly, maybe in a dream, but also just maybe you're daydreaming or thinking about something else entirely, and then suddenly the answer pops up at you. And moments like that do, to me, suggest there really is an active unconscious that we don't always have access to. And so different. So Rick Rubin, in his recent book on creativity, talks about this, that if you're stuck on trying to form a solution to this creative problem, to just think about it and then forget, and then the solution might come to you later if it really is a priority for you. John Cleese has written about this, the mathematician Richard Hamming. And I've had this experience in my own life. And I think, well, where did that come from? How did I think that up? Because it seems like such an elegant solution or a way to solve this problem that I've been thinking about, but not in that specific moment when the solution came to me. So yeah, there seems like that seems to support this idea of a dynamic unconscious that slowly helps us to solve novel problems, even if we aren't actively thinking about it.
And it's not a lot of this is if you were in the therapists love hearing dreams. I think I think most people.
Can't. Because regular people hate hearing.
That's like a common thing, right? People hate listening to other people's dreams.
Yeah, I mean, as a writer and as a writing teacher, I can tell you that the number one rule of writing is don't describe your dream, because there's nothing more boring to a reader. I mean, you really have to earn it. Oh yeah,
love them. I can't wait to get them, and it's and they really do provide an image that's evocative, emotionally evocative, and charged, and you see interpersonal dynamics in a more vivid way, and it really is you can kind of get somebody's dealing with anger and they have a dream where they're being attacked or something, and you kind of get a sense of, it's it really does sometimes crystallize and clarify things. And, you know, if they're depressed, they often have depressive dreams, but it's, what is the dream? Is the dream that they're alone and it's freezing cold? Is the dream that everybody hates them and they're being shamed? I mean, there's different types of depressive dreams, and it just feels to me just like such an emotionally evocative, rich way where you get the metaphors that resonate with their unconscious, and then you can kind of, it just helps the process so much, I feel like.
Andrew, am I right in saying that at least the Freudian approach to dreaming is not that it's not that the dream is trying to reveal something to you, but it's trying to conceal, and that it's the kind of job of the analyst and the patient to like decode the dream. It's like there's a sort of a limited amount of information your unconscious is willing to expose to you. And that what is it there's like the idea of like the latent and the manifest content of the dream, right? And so the manifest content is like, you know, whatever, it could be a couch or an exam or something. But then the latent content is, it like could mean something else. And your unconscious has to sort of conceal it a bit to make it safe for you to experience that in your dream. Is that right?
Yeah, that, I guess it kind of depends on how. I don't think there's not like one rule. I think like you could dream about something you want in a more vivid way if you could tolerate that desire. And then maybe there's other times that it's more concealed, and you would kind of take each item in the dream and ask the person to free associate to it to kind of try to figure out, what's behind it. Yeah. So there's like things are concealed in symbols and stuff. I would say if you look at Freud's case studies, maybe even a lot of his examples in interpretation of dreams, his style of interpreting people is pretty wild. Like his ability to take something and turn it into something, like a very famous dream is from the case study Wolfman. That there's a book Wolfman. I'm not a huge fan of the case studies because the interpretation is so wild. It feels so wild to me. I have trouble following it and like getting it. Like it's just, but so the kid has a dream that he's looking out his window, and in the tree, there are a bunch of wolves that are watching him, in the branches of the tree. And what this means is that when he was a kid, walked in on his parents having sex, and his parents were having sex doggy style, which works in German. So it's like so he saw them have sex doggy style, but in the dream, the wolves are watching him. But in reality, he's watching his parents. So it gets inverted. And then it's just like, it's so convoluted how he gets there.
Wait, he was a child when he saw this image?
Yeah. The primal scene. This is your parents having sex is the primal scene. And he sees it in its doggy style. And this is what happened. And this explains the symptoms. I mean, it is really wild. And I
actually remember seeing his parents having sex. This is, but he's
that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't remember if he actually has an aha moment where he says, "Oh, I remember I walked in," and then it all ties up all together, or if Freud would totally be the type of person who would suppose that memory happened but is repressed and not accessible to the patient.
Well, now Edding mentions it. Yeah. I mean, the power of suggestion must be huge. Like this is the other thing. So the analyst can say, "Oh, it's this." And then the person says, "Oh, you're right. I did see that." And
the inferential leaps are really wild and hard to follow and weird. And you're kind of like, it seems like the evidence for these claims is thin. I don't really like the case studies personally. There's only one psychoanalytic case study that I really like. And it was Breuer, Freud's mentor, who wrote it. And it's Anna O. It's the first psychoanalytic case study. I love that case study. The others, the ones that Freud wrote, I find them all to be really weird. And they're kind of interesting as a novelty, but like, I don't love them.
One of the things that you told me, Andrew, when we first started discussing possibly doing something like this, you said something like 50% of psychoanalysis is totally insightful and interesting, and then the other half is totally bullshit. And like your job as a practitioner or a student is to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. But what I find interesting is like even the bullshit parts are still like weirdly interesting to me, like what you just described there about this inversion and this kid and seeing like, it makes a certain amount of weird sense, even though it doesn't. And I find that intriguing.
Yeah, he doesn't. I think with that, like, I feel like maybe it's that he didn't show his work and really explain. Like, I would, if I wanted to say, I think actually you hate your mom. This is like my interpretation. I am not going to base that off of the fact that you saw a wolf in a dream. I am going to get some more data before I propose that. And I want lots of data that feels pretty strong. And so I think there's something about the way that it's communicated that I don't see enough evidence to support the things he's saying. And the later psychoanalysis is actually much better. I mean, I think it definitely got a lot tightened up and a lot more clinically useful over time. Freud, a lot of the stuff that's like the weird stuff that people don't really, even psychoanalysts don't really use or talk about so much, was really, really important to him. Freud's idea of the Oedipus complex, that kids go through an infantile sexual development from the oral stage to the anal stage to the phallic stage and have an Oedipus complex and want to kill the father and have sex with the mother, and it's all focused on boys. It totally ignores girls. This whole thing was like, for him, the defining feature of psychoanalysis. And if you did not agree with this entirely, you're out. And when you look at the people that he ruptured with, like if it's Alfred Adler or Jung or whatever, what really led to the rupture is they didn't entirely believe in exactly this thing. And now not that many people believe it. I think it's a really weird and not very clinically useful framework. But and that's one of his most famous crazy ideas that is, it doesn't have evidence to support it. I also have just never really found it clinically useful. I've never felt like that was going to really help a therapy case that I had. But he was really, really devoted to it. And I do think it's fair to criticize him for that.
I mean, I think that in some ways, the popular, and I've had this experience so many times where I hear an opinion about a person and it's kind of received opinion and everyone kind of quote knows this. And then when I go back to the original source, I discover that it's completely wrong or misinterpreted. So in one way that Freud is unfairly maligned is in one of his, I think it was in one of the introductory lectures, he acknowledges that genetics play a role in mental illness and how people turn out. But in the popular imagination of Freud, it's, your parents are 100% responsible for everything that you do, everything you become, every attribute that you have and express. But no, Freud did acknowledge like there is a genetic component, but there's a limited amount that we can do about that. So we need to focus on what we can control or what we can explain and how we can help the patient. And that blew my mind because I, thought, Freud was just this crazy guy who thought your mom is determines your entire future based on how she treats you. On the Oedipus complex point, I think like there is a way to, like not like the crazy version where the child literally wants to have sex with the mother, but or the father, I guess, in the case of the girl, but, there is this very interesting idea in evolutionary psychology of essentially attempting to maximize parental investment. And one way that this can express itself is if you're a small child and you potentially might have to compete with a sibling for parental care and resources. The addition of a sibling would reduce your survival, your fitness, whatever. And so, one way to prevent that from happening is to essentially kind of interfere with your parents' relationship. And that can be expressed as kind of quasi-romantic love for the opposite sex parent. So if you're a little boy and you're worried, like, oh my God, like my parents might have another kid and then I'll get less attention or less goodies for myself. So I'll kind of interrupt affection that is expressed between the two parents, or I'll say that I want to sleep in the bed tonight with mommy, or I'll do things to basically prevent my parents from having sex with each other. And of course, this is kind of an evolutionary approach to this.
Sophisticated child.
Yeah, but none of this is happening at a conscious level, right? Like they're behaving on impulse and instinct, and they could never verbally articulate this to you. In the same way that in the Freudian model, they wouldn't be able to articulate, oh, well, I want to kill my mom and have sex with or kill my dad and have sex with my mom or whatever. This is sort of happening at the level of the unconscious, but the evolutionary approach also happens in that way of they don't consciously say, I don't want a sibling, so I'm going to go mess with my parents a little bit. It's just they're acting in this way, and then the explanation for it is, it makes a certain amount of kind of sense.
And the idea of rivalry and identification with the same-sex parent and, the way that people attach to the opposite sex parent and sibling rivalry. And there are just a number of different things that have so much resonance to so many families and so many individuals. And so I definitely think the themes of sex and aggression that are kind of, present beneath the surface in kids. And I think there's a lot of stuff in the model that actually does fit a lot of the time and does have insights. I think, I wouldn't, but the thing that he broke with Alfred Adler about, for example, was like, Freud was like, you have a fear that to punish you for wanting the mother, your father will castrate you. And Alfred Adler's like, no, the primary thing is that you're worried that your penis is small and you want to have a bigger penis, and the insecurity about your penis size is primary. And Freud says, no, the fear that your dad's going to castrate. So they've split over that. Was what?
I'd love to see those two on like a Sunday morning artsy shop.
But there's so much like weird stuff there. And it's like, but I totally agree. And I really want to look at like modern interpretations of the Oedipal story that I think are a lot more grounded and useful. And some of them are really, really fascinating.
Well, we have to wrap up. I think this has been a great inaugural episode. Are there a couple of book titles that you might recommend to people who are interested in exploring these ideas?
Well, I think we could do, I have a few things. I'm not sure what you would want to start with, but one of the best places to start, I think, is a really beautiful short book called Freud and Man's Soul by Bruno Bettelheim. Mm-hmm. It's very readable. It's about 30,000 words. And Bruno Bettelheim is an extremely controversial figure, and we will talk about that. But like, this book is so beautifully written, and it has a lot of insights into Freud, and a couple problems, but it's just a beautiful book. Another one that I think it'd be really interesting to talk about, Anna O. She's the first psychoanalytic patient. It's a very short case study. It's a very kind of scandalously intriguing little nugget of how did psychoanalysis start and what did it come from? And it's a really beautiful little story as well. I could suggest others.
Yeah, well, I think those are two great ones to start with. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been a great discussion. I'm excited to do more.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for watching and listening. And we'll see you next time.